Hello, and welcome back to Behind the Post. My next guest is a content marketer at Drift, where she oversees their blog, ebook, newsletter, and social media strategy. When she's not writing or strategizing content offers, you can often find her running through the streets of Boston or cooking up new recipes. Without further ado, please welcome to the show Elizabeth Hillfrank. Elizabeth, are you ready to go behind the post with me?
I am.
Amazing. Look, I'm so excited to have you here today, and I can't wait to talk about all the amazing initiatives that you're running over at Drift. But before we get there, I have to know how you got into marketing and how you found yourself at Drift. Could you give our listeners just a brief look at your professional journey?
Yeah, definitely. So I fell into tech marketing by happenstance, studied journalism in college, and got out. My friend was a Northeastern co-op here at Drift. She knew of some internships popping up in the video production section, actually, of the marketing team. Connected me with the manager, got hired, interned as a video production intern for about 6 months before going full-time in that position. And then for about 2.5 years, I was on the Drift Studios video team, where I largely worked on our Drift training, product education content, our certifications, kind of everything that went into that from pre-production, post-production. Then after about 2.5, 3 years, I realized what I really liked about video production was less the lighting and the cameras and more figuring out what content we were going to make and why and building those scripts. Luckily, at that same time, the content marketing team at Drift started to go through a little restructure and a position opened to actually own our podcast program. So I owned podcasts for about 1.5 years. We had 6 podcasts when I started owning that. And so that was managing kind of everything from, again, pre-production, little bit of post-production, but heavily on the promotion front. And then that leads me to my position now, where I oversee, as you said, blogs, books, newsletters, social media. As I like to say, if there's words on it, I probably looked at it.
Love it. And for anyone who may not know Drift, could you just also give a brief overview of Drift and the value you bring to your customers?
Yeah, so Drift exists to remove as much friction as possible from the B2B buying experience. We firmly believe that B2B buying should be as easy as B2C buying, especially on websites. We use our AI-powered technology to deliver personalized experiences at scale on our website, and we do that through chatbots, email, video, and as I mentioned, AI.
Love it. I have to kick off with the video since you have so much experience in video. I can't wait to pick your brain. And I specifically wanted to talk about video for social since you do run Drift Social now. I would love to know, what do you believe are the keys to success when you're putting a video out on social? What do you think make a successful, strong video that's going to captivate and engage your audience?
Yeah, so I think the key there is what you said at the end, captivating and engaging the audience. These days, people's attention spans are so short, mine included.
Oh,
We've
yeah.
all succumbed to scroll culture. So really thinking about what's going to stop the scroll and get your point across really in the least amount of time as possible. So if you're taking a longer form video, finding that, say a webinar, finding that 1 or 2 sentences, that's the most engaging part, will get them to stop, maybe think about what's being said and click in, hopefully even further, to then watch the whole webinar. I think another thing really top of mind is knowing that a lot of people watch videos without audio. If you're scrolling on your phone, often I know my stuff is silent. So thinking about captions, graphics, the representation of what you're trying to convey, because if someone's scrolling on their lunch break, they may not have their headphones in to watch. So those are the 2 key things I keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is so important to include captions. That's something that I learned early on, just to be accessible also to everyone that's watching your video. And because when you open a network, it usually will mute it automatically. So it doesn't just start playing the audio. So that's where it's also important to like Instagram versus TikTok, for example. When you open up TikTok, it obviously starts playing the video automatically. But when you open it on Instagram Reels, it won't. So that's when you can utilize like text on the screen or a graphic to really pull people in. So you have to work obviously in line with the networks. And I love getting super granular on the show. So I'd love to know any other little tips and tricks you have around video. Maybe we can even talk about post production when it comes to editing videos. Do you have any software that you like for editing videos when it comes to social or adding subtitles or around the other aspects of video? When it comes to social, do you think that we should be including all these graphics and music, or should we keep it more simple? Or does like adding that video and those other elements make it more eye-catching? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, that's definitely something we've iterated on a lot during my time here and trying to figure out what that best look and feel is. I think one thing that I should mention is also including an engaging thumbnail,
Mm.
especially reminded me when you said the different platforms, because LinkedIn allows a custom thumbnail, which someone scrolling on desktop, that will be what they see first. So maybe that's still text that gets the key point across, but it's something that will, again, make people think.
Mhm.
So definitely a compelling thumbnail for the channels, and in the world of Instagram, thinking about that for how your grid will look, because we
Yeah.
all want an aesthetically pleasing Instagram grid.
Yeah.
In terms of making these social assets, we do it all in Adobe Premiere, After Effects, all of that. I would say we steer clear from doing like a formal title card on a social piece, because again, that just using that 5 seconds up front is 5 seconds
Mhm.
that you could be losing your audience. For our podcast, for example, we usually did a template that would have the video right in the center, the captions on the bottom. That way you see the host or the guest, especially with something like podcasts where maybe this is like now meta because we're on a podcast, but
Mhm.
maybe the guest posts and it's like, oh, I was on this podcast, and then that person's followers see it and they see their face and they're like, oh, I know
Mhm.
that person, so I'm
Yeah.
curious what they said about XYZ.
Mhm.
So like getting to those main points as soon as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like everyone now loves watching podcasts. I feel like before, obviously, it was podcasts, everyone was just like listening to the audio, but now I feel like there's been a push for video, and even us, like we get usually more views on our YouTube than we do like on Spotify and Apple. So I feel like including that video in the promo instead of just doing like a just the audio bite or audio clip, I feel like that also really helps engage people too. And
Yeah, I agree. Our former CEO, now executive chairman, David Cancel, he is a huge fan of video. And from the start of our podcast, he wanted them to be video forward as well. So we've been doing video podcasts for as long as I've been at Drift, for 5 years at least.
yeah.
And it's really been cool though to see that evolution over time. And I think it goes back to people want to put faces to the names, or I think about when I do listen to just audio podcasts and trying to envision these people, what they might look like, how they fit into the stories. So
Yeah.
I get it.
Definitely. Yeah, it goes a long way. I have a podcast that I listen to every single day. It's a daily podcast. And on days that they don't have the video, I'm like, oh, I wish I could see their face right now as they're talking about this. So it really does go a long way with connecting with those people and just the overall story of whatever they're talking about. So I definitely agree. And I want to jump to social strategy and social, because obviously that is one aspect of what you're doing at Drift. I'd love to know, as you have progressed throughout your career and now that you are managing social, do you have a certain philosophy when it comes to social? Love to know how you're approaching how you show up.
Yeah, I think for how we approach social, I think a lot about it in the way that Drift exists to make B2B buying be more like B2C buying. And that's how we tried to show up on social too, because at the end of the day, even if you're selling to another business, the person who's buying your product is a person, is a
Yeah.
human. They're the ones scrolling the LinkedIn, not their company name. And so I think from that perspective, I like to think a lot about how I use social media, but also how my friends use it, how my family uses it. My dad definitely uses his Instagram differently than I use my Instagram.
Mhm.
And thinking about those, like listening around me to what people are saying about how they use their social platforms, which ones they like to go on the most, and then trying to incorporate that into the social strategy. And I think with that comes with realizing even ourselves as a brand showing up on social media. Like we want to be sure that we're showcasing we're human too. So trying to jump on trends that we're seeing on social media, not just be like, hey, download this, hey, attend this, do
Mhm.
this, do that, but engaging with our audience back and forth as like representing that, yeah, we're humans too, and we want to connect to you on a personal level.
Yeah, building that community. I love that you mentioned looking at social, how you also consume social. And I think that's really important. And that's something that I always have in the back of my mind when I'm creating content is I'm thinking, okay, if I was scrolling through my feed, like how would I react to this? Would this hook pull me in? Is this way too long? And I'm just going to scroll right past it. So I think that is super important because sometimes it is easy, like, when you're just writing your content in your content calendar, sometimes it's easy to forget that you're also sending this out to thousands of people that are gonna be seeing it, so it's always a good reminder to think, "Okay, how is someone going to perceive this, and what can I do to pull them in more?" And I would love to hear a little bit more about your strategy. I always find this so interesting. You don't have to give too much away, but I would love to hear a little bit about your social strategy.
Yeah. So I think overseeing most of the content here at Drift gives me an advantage to know what's coming. I've also seen the longer form versions of a lot of the content we might be promoting. So it gives me the ability to break down these long form assets into multiple different components or know the backstory of what came to them to then be able to be like, oh, these are the pieces we want to pull out. So for us, definitely on LinkedIn, our most engaged with content and the things that get the most impressions tend to be when we can tag another company, another human, which again goes back to everything we've already been saying. Makes
Mhm.
sense. People like to hype each other up on social media. If they see a face
Yeah.
of someone they know, they're like, oh my gosh, like great tip or whatever.
Yeah.
So one example of a social media plan that's been going pretty well right now is we recently released a book based on our GTM go to market lab virtual event, which was a full week event with people across marketing, sales, operations, and partnerships talking about how they're thinking about their go to market strategy in 2023. We compiled the key tips from each of the speakers, put it into a book, and then we did like a standard, like, hey, we launched a new ebook. But then since then, we've been highlighting each speaker and their one tip, like week over week on social. And so, again, that way we're tagging the speaker, we're tagging the company. We're not letting the asset die just after the first week. I think that's
Mhm.
a big one. You can't just cross your fingers and hope everyone's going to see your first post.
Yeah.
And those are really great ways to like again get to the point with a key takeaway, or it could be something that's like a hot take, like this person said something about AI in sales that's like super controversial compared to what these people usually say. And so again, it's stopping the scroll.
Mhm.
So that's been working really well. And similarly for our next event coming up, we've been highlighting all of the speakers beforehand, and that again has been performing in the sense of people being like, oh my gosh, this person is speaking at this event. I
Mhm.
want to go.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned not just posting something once and then forgetting about it, because I think also on social, you're saying the same thing multiple times, but just thinking about a different way to say it. And I actually saw this on LinkedIn today that when you post, apparently only 11% of your network will see that post, something like that, which it also does make sense because not every single one of your followers is going to be on LinkedIn that day, that time, and see it. So I love that you mentioned continuing to post and not just doing a one off post. And also, I've had people ask me for tips when it comes to increasing their brand page following. And I always like to give this tip because I feel like not a lot of people talk about it. And it's a great way to just get more brand awareness. And that is customer shout outs. And specifically, if, say, an executive at one of your customers, like an executive there, wins an award, giving them a shout out from your brand page. It's really, first of all, good for building community and show that you support your customers, but also everyone, like they're tagged in it. So their network sees it. People are congratulating them on the post. That's a really good little hack for anyone listening in to just get more eyes on your content. Also, you're celebrating your customers, which is your community. And that's the most important thing at the end of the day. It's a little tip for everyone listening in.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip. And it reminds me, we actually, for Customer Appreciation Month, which was May, one of our customer marketers was like, oh, let's highlight different customers' drift bots because you can custom design them that we think are like really cute. One was a cat, one was a cloud, maybe just different ways people created our robot. And all we did was like post like the cat one, be like, look at this cute cat bot from XYZ company, like happy customer appreciation month. They like were some of our top performing posts because I think like
Yeah.
the companies would see it and be like, oh my gosh, like our bot got a shout out. Like it was just
Mhm.
something different on their page.
Yeah, I love that. People love to be recognized. I feel like this too when I comment on a brand's page on Instagram and they reply back to me. It makes you feel special. So when a brand recognizes you like that, it really goes a long way. So I love that. And it's so simple to do. It's not something that takes weeks of planning. I really
Yeah.
love that. I want to still stay on LinkedIn for a second. I know you spoke about a few of the things that you're having success with, but I would love to know a few more little details. I know right now a lot of people are talking about losing the link and no one really wants to click on things anymore. And you have to make your LinkedIn page more of a destination. So I'd love to know your take on that. Are you posting a lot of links or could you share the breakdown on how you're like approaching your LinkedIn content specifically? And I would also love to know if you're comfortable sharing how much you're posting on LinkedIn, because that's also a hot topic right now.
Yes, totally. So to answer your first question, we are posting our links. I post them right in the direct post. We have gone back and forth with the link in comments or the link in the post. When
Yeah.
I took over social, I like basically tested one versus the other for a month and like the click-throughs on posting it directly in the post were like significantly higher than
Mm,
putting in the comments. So
yeah.
I was like, that answers that. We'll stick to that. And also from a management perspective, it's easier because I can just put it all into our scheduling
Yeah.
tool and then it just sends out versus me having to remember that it went live at like 11 a.m. and go back in and type it all in.
Definitely.
To your point about the scheduling, we also went through a whole process last year where we basically realized we were cannibalizing our own content just by posting so much. Like we weren't even giving people a chance to see it because one post would go out and then another like
Yeah.
5 minutes later.
Hmm.
So we aim to post on LinkedIn specifically no more than 2 times a day.
Hmm.
That's been the sweet spot where people have time to engage with the content. And yeah, that's what we aim for.
Yeah. That's the same thing was happening to us about a year ago. We just had so much content, and there were times I was posting up to 3 times per day. And when we cut back, our engagement significantly increased. And it makes sense. The posts were getting lost in the shuffle and people weren't being able to engage with them. So less is more. And I have to know how you are managing this all with the blogs, the ebooks, everything. How on earth are you managing this all?
I'm a big calendar person, so those have definitely come through. So specifically for marketing, we use Asana for all of our project management. And every team has their own calendars within there. I have one specifically for content, and then I also have one for social. So, because for social, maybe say there's a webinar happening, the webinar person isn't directly on the content team, she's on the demand gen team. So, she'd be able to submit a request for me to post. And then I can, like every Friday, I look at the social calendar for the next week and try to divide it out so that it's only 2 posts a day because maybe everyone put a due date for Wednesday, but it doesn't actually have to go out Wednesday. It just
Yeah.
has to be out during that week. So that is huge for social. Similarly for content, keeping track via Asana, but I also do it in a separate kind of a Google sheet where that's good for me because I can one allocate out, is this something I'm going to write? Is this someone else is going to write,
Hmm.
etc. And then I can also look at that and be like, okay, I know that we're going to want to promote this 3 times. So I'm able to overlap the social and the content by looking at that calendar and planning out ahead of time, which then helps like the creative team make the social assets in time or enough of them for what we'll want and just keep everything together. But it's certainly a lot of moving pieces, that is for sure. So project management is huge.
Yes. How often in advance are you planning that social content? And how do you also, this kind of leads me into my next question. But first, I'll stick on how are you managing the social content? Like, how are you prepping it like 2 weeks before, a week before, the week of? Like, how do you determine what makes it to the feed and how far in advance are you prepping it?
Yeah, so for content that I'm directly involved with, so say an ebook or a blog, that will be usually about 2 weeks out. I will, if it's a bigger offer piece like a book, I will develop more of a bigger social plan where and I have to give credit to Diane, the copywriter, who made this template that I now just copy and paste. But it'll have a section of the art that we're looking for, the copy for the post, what the CTA is going to be, and then like how many posts we want. And that will help me, one, just it's easier for me to write multiple posts when I'm already like thinking about the content versus doing it one week and the next and be like, okay, what was this piece and what was the interesting fact about it? And so I'll make out that plan about 2 weeks ahead. That way the design team can create all the assets to be ready by the time that we want to start posting. For social posts that are outside of my team, usually the requests come in. It varies. I'll get most of them by the beginning of the quarter, just as they're
Hmm.
planning. They'll be
Yeah.
like within Asana, we have templates. So again, for a webinar, we'll have simple social promotion, which means only 1 or 2 posts for the whole event. And
Hmm.
so those will just automatically go in. So I'll be able to take a bigger look at everything. But you always have to leave room for the one-offs or
Yeah.
random ones. As I said, every Friday when I go through and schedule everything, then I'll go back and I'm like, wait, where'd this guy like sneak in here? So
Yeah.
I always have to double check, that's for sure.
Yeah, all those last minute requests. And speaking of that, I would love to ask about how, since you do oversee all of the content itself, how do you approach the different areas with repurposing in mind, or do you keep repurposing in mind since you are with the content from the beginning? Are you thinking of, okay, how can I use this for social down the line?
Definitely. I always try to go into any brainstorm session wearing both hats.
Mm.
So the content and socials. For example, a month or two back, we had an entire planning day and brainstorm day for the second half of the year and what our content was going to be. And as those came up, I was also thinking about the social component. Okay, how would this be compelling for our social audience? Or is there a way that we can promote via polls or something ahead of the content to then make sure we're answering the questions that our audience really wants to hear about in this webinar, in this book, etc. But yeah, always trying to think about it from both sides because at the end of the day, that's just going to
Yeah.
make my life easier too.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I'm always advocating for social media managers to be in those conversations from the beginning so that when the asset is finalized, they're not hearing about it for the first time. Then they have to start. It's so much easier if they're just included from the beginning. So,
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. The earlier a social media manager can know about something, the better promotion it's going to get because it's on their radar. They can think about it in more creative, strategic ways.
100%. Look, we are nearing the end of the show here, and I have one final question, which I ask all of my guests, and that is, what is one thing you wish your colleagues in other departments knew about working in social media?
I think that goes back to a lot of what we have talked about today is I think sometimes people forget or don't realize that there is a whole strategy behind owning the social media for a brand because it is a huge representation of our brand. So I think knowing that putting in that social media request isn't as easy as they may think of just like posting the link and being like, sign up here. It's like there needs to be thought put into what we're going to post that's going to get them to stop. Why should we post this webinar on this day if we're already talking about this topic? Like, does it make sense to our audience? Is it too much of the same thing? The strategy goes all the way through from figuring out the copy, how much promotion, when to promote, all of that. And so leading back to what you just said, the earlier we know, the better.
Mhm. I love that because nothing is worse than getting a message. Can you post this today? And you already have something already planned for the day, or you're again talking about that already on that day. And now you have to move stuff around and it changes the whole story of what you were telling that week. So I think that is, yeah, everyone listening in that works outside of social needs to understand that. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate how tactical you got, and I love how you shared so many little tips and tricks. So I really appreciate it, and I think our audience is really gonna pull a lot from this episode. So thank you so much for joining me behind the post.
Thank you so much for having me.